and it's now my pleasure to introduce Dr. Adrian Wiesner. Dr. Wiesner is an MD, PhD at the National Institutes of Health, and has been involved in CLL research for many, many years in multiple areas, and is going to talk to us on vaccines in CLL patients, a timely and important topic. Thanks so much, Dr. Wiesner.
Thank you, Dr. Kaufman. It's my pleasure to continue this session and discuss vaccines in CLL patients. So why vaccinate? Well, vaccines are effective in reducing the risk or the severity of infections. And that's very well studied in really large trials with tens of thousands of participants. Typically, these trials exclude CLL patients, and there is a lot less data on vaccine responses for CLL patients. There are small series that report vaccine response rates in CLL patients, and they're quite variable. So for instance, reports on the efficacy of seasonal vaccines range from about 15 to 65%. Still, I would really hardly recommend to get the vaccines that prevent infections, in particular the seasonal influenza, the pneumonia vaccines, the Pneumovax and the Prevnar, the shingles vaccine that recently has become available for CLL patients. There's also hepatitis B and tetanus, diphtheria, pertussis that are recommended and safe for CLL patients. There are several travel vaccines that are also safe to get. The vaccines you should avoid are those that use live viruses. So the big question when you discuss a vaccine is it a live virus? Avoid those vaccines. Here is a suggested schedule. Now this schedule for the pneumonia vaccination with Prevnar and Pneumovax. Now this is a schedule really for immunocompromised individuals. It is Prevnar as the first vaccine, then followed at least 2 months later by the Pneumovax 23, which is repeated at least with an interval of 5 years in between those two. 5 years later again, Pneumovax 23. What's shown here is a recommended regimen we apply to immunocompromised individuals at the NIH. So we recommend to repeat the Pneumovax every 5 years, but this does not apply for people older than 65, where only one Pneumovax repeat is recommended. For influenza vaccination, I highly recommend you do get the influenza vaccine. And often the question comes up, well, should I get the high dose or the standard dose influenza vaccine? This is data from a New England journal, a paper reporting on the influenza and a comparative trial testing 2 doses of the influenza vaccine in healthy individuals older than 65. The high dose vaccine protected patients very well, with only 1.4% of participants actually having influenza-like illness during the observation period. The standard dose was also effective, but slightly less, with 1.9% of patients developing an influenza-like illness. So this study concluded that for patients older than 65, the high-dose vaccine is more effective. The CDC recommendation is with no preference for any one of the flu vaccine types, and any age-appropriate flu vaccine is fine. So basically, the main message is get vaccinated. And if you're older than 65, the high-dose vaccine may be more effective. What you should avoid is the flu mist vaccine. This is an intranasal live virus vaccine that, because it's a live virus vaccine, is not recommended. So now with treatments, obviously with especially the BTK inhibitors, where patients may be on the ibrutinib or acalabrutinib for extended periods of times, for years, or many years possibly. Can we vaccinate these patients? So yes, to some degree, patients on a BTK inhibitor can respond to a vaccine. We tested this in a study at the NIH using the seasonal flu vaccine, and 27% of the patients on ibrutinib responded to this seasonal influenza vaccine. That's a study that was led by Claire Sun. And we recently expanded our study on vaccines to 2 different vaccine types. One is the Shingrix vaccine, so it helps prevent shingles or the herpes zoster reinfection. Shingrix is caused by the same, shingles is caused by the same virus that also causes chickenpox in children early in life. But this virus never really goes away. It stays hidden in the body, and it can come back, it can reactivate, and then cause shingles, which is often associated with nerve pain. 1 out of 3 people in the US are estimated to develop this reinfection or this reactivation of the virus in their lifetime. And the risk of this reactivation increases with age and when the immune system is weakened. So this is now a new vaccine that is not live vaccine. There was an old one that was called Zostavax, which was a live virus. Shingrix is new. It's a recombinant, so there's no virus in it. What we test in some ways, so what we provide with that is good care for patients and the protection from getting herpes zoster, getting shingles. What we're testing biologically is the memory of the immune system, because virtually all of us had chickenpox, had exposure to this virus before. So our immune system recognizes the vaccine as something it has seen before. The other vaccine we use is hepatitis B vaccine. So hepatitis B can infect the liver, can cause serious liver damage, and is a big issue in healthcare systems. So all of the physicians, nurses you encounter have been vaccinated with a vaccine against hepatitis B. The hepatitis B infection is currently incurable and affects up to 1 million people in the US. So what we biologically actually test here is the immune response to a new infection, because most of us are naive to this virus. And so our immune system has to go really from the basics to mount an immune response. What are vaccine side effects? Most of the time, they are really limited to the first few days after vaccination. The vaccines are typically given into a muscle in the upper arm. And so there's mostly local reactions, some soreness, some redness, some swelling. Then some people get fatigue, headaches, some muscle aches, maybe a fever. Again, most of these reactions are mild and typically resolve within the first 2 to 3 days. And think about, maybe it's actually a good thing that there is some reaction to a vaccine, because it really means we're triggering the immune system to recognize what we're vaccinating for. So we did this trial with the Shingrix vaccine and hepatitis vaccine in patients in the NIH trials, coming to the NIH. The safety we find in CLL patients is as reported in patients that have been vaccinated in the general population. We have seen no safety difference whether these are treatment naive CLL, so in the watch and wait, never been treated, or being treated with a BTK inhibitor, either ibrutinib or acalabrutinib. The response rate to the Shingrix vaccine was 40 to 50%, compared to over 90% in the general population. So, okay, there is less response in CLL patients, but still about half really get a good titer that should protect from shingles. The response rate to Heplisav is still under investigation, but appears to be lower and also be more impacted whether patients are on a BTK inhibitor than the Shingrix vaccine. So for Shingrix vaccine, we've seen pretty good responses in both groups, treatment-naive patients and patients on BTK inhibitors. So I would highlight that we had over 100 patients participating in these vaccine trials. Would encourage you to consider participation in such a trial. Both of these vaccines are given twice, 3 months apart. Patients can participate with a diagnosis of CLL or SLL, being on watch and wait, or on a BTK inhibitor, or on venetoclax, or having recently completed treatment. Patients cannot have been vaccinated prior with Shingrix and no shingles infection in the past year. No prior hepatitis B infection or vaccination. And unfortunately, we cannot vaccinate patients on IVIG in these trials because that would interfere with assessing the response to the vaccine. So here's contact information. If you're interested in participating on a vaccine trial, please reach out.